Works Gang Reduction Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Rue and O'Farrell. I believe Ms. Martinez will be joining us, and Mr. Buscaino is excused today. We've got a number of items. I'd like to take 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 on consent. I can't do that, though, at the moment because we have comments on multiple items. So I'd like to start our meeting with our multiple comment speakers. And we can begin with Ms. Ramirez. For 2 minutes on the items.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, number one, no funding to our pussy faggot Eric Garcetti and the Democrats because they have made a mess of everything.
Ms. Ramirez, there has to be items within the purview of this committee. So if you could, you're talking not general public comment, unless you want to move to your general public comment for this committee.
No, we're talking about the funding of the Volunteer LA Hub. I'm starting with item number 1. And I'm saying
you need
no
to be clear
funding.
because the funding is not going to their office. Go ahead.
Okay, that's my own personal. I want people to know that there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse here in this city. And it's not helping the homeless. That's why we're there in the first place. And it's not helping any of us. But we get thrown out all the time. And we stand on principle. Number 2, ladies and gentlemen, leave the Santa Monica Mountains alone. Once you start tampering with Mother Nature, it's going to backfire, it's going to damage, it's going to destroy. Leave them alone. We've already done a lot of harm to all the mountains, all these wildfire areas or wildlife areas, and it's now a disaster. They're all disaster zones. And that's why we have an epidemic in wildfires. And number 4, ladies and gentlemen, the weekend gridlocks are a horrible disaster and a confusing headache to the metro buses, the dash buses, the pedestrians, the tourists, and all the workers. We need to better organize when you do construction work and only projects, street projects, under public works. We need to have better cohesive communications and a smoother way of streamlining the information and functioning so everybody could coexist peacefully and get to their places correctly. And that needs to be done immediately because really there's a lot of project works being done and there's a lot of tourism. We need to correct that as soon as possible, especially with the homeless situation. It's a mess. And number 5, it would be outright fraud and theft in accepting a grant award from the California Board of State and Community Corrections. Because one, California, especially Los Angeles, we have an epidemic in violence. The homeless people, we are attacked, violated, and beaten and robbed every single day. So now my 1 minute?
Now you may have 1 minute for general items within the purview of this committee.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, again, within the purview and the purview and the purview of this committee. Gang reduction. What have all of you done to stop the gang violence? As a homeless woman, I see what goes on out there. You have, especially, I move around so much from the Music Center Grand Park bathrooms and the area to La Placita. We got white trash junkies. We've got violent Skid Row niggers. We've got Chango gangbangers and wetbacks. And we've got, and oddly enough, 99.9% of these homeless males are bisexuals, trannies, and faggots, and lesbos, and they perpetrate crimes against homeless women. Again, who helps us? Nobody. Because one, they are the status quo protected class. We are not protected. When we get robbed, attacked, and beaten, and urinated, and loud toxic noise, no one helps us. We cry for help, and God bless the LAPD. They can only do so much, but they say just blow it off. So I tell the fucking niggers and all the white trash, fuck you. God bless America.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Next we have Wayne from Encino.
Right, next nigga up the bat. Now, let's talk about number 1, the Volunteer Hub project from the mayor, that sick fucking faggot that lives over there in the Getty Center, sitting there getting his ass pawked by another man. I say no to that nigga, number 1. No to other niggas, number 1. We don't need our mayor continuing his drive to turn young men into faggots. Now, number 3, the temporary closure of Victory Boulevard. That involves Blob and Blair, but also John Lee got on this one. Now, you know that Blob and Blair and his nigger wife have been moving niggers further and further west into the CD number 3. All the way over, further pushing these niggers all the way to the border of the 12th district. Yes, sir, because Bob Blobenfeld is a nigger lover, and that's why he wants more Jews to be suffering the consequences of other niggers. That's
your
right.
Comments limited to the
I am
committee
clearly,
items.
sir, on the topic.
That's your warning.
The city
Keep your
attorney
items
knows
limited.
it, don't you? Don't you? Of course, she don't say nothing. Silence is an
Spindler,
admission
you need
of
to stick
guilt.
to the agenda item.
You need to keep
You were off topic.
No, now you say
That's
it.
your final warning
That's
on
right.
an off topic.
That-
You need to stay on
that's
topic.
right. That's right. And you see, the button gets pushed, you see. But that's okay. Now, I'm just saying that CD3, number 3, is co-sponsored by a nigger lover trying to push niggers over further into the 12th district. And John Lee, fine Republican Asian gentleman who don't want your clients. So shut down Victory Boulevard and keep your niggers where they belong, especially in your house, fool. So now the general comment. I continue to come to this meeting and be harassed by the nigger lover blah and Blair. I continue to be harassed. Why? It's not my fault you married a Schwarzer. It's not my fault you don't have a real Jewish
Spindler,
wife.
that is not
and
within the
that's
jurisdiction
the
of this
anger
body.
that goes into what the mind of this motherfucking councilman is. That's why you can't
Mr.
chair
Spindler,
a proper meeting.
You're now ejected from the meeting.
I'm not ejected
not
from the
because
meeting.
of the content.
I
but
didn't
because
get a
you
warning.
refused to speak on the
I
items
didn't get a
that are
goddamn
within the
fucking
committee.
warning,
Goodbye,
did I?
Mr. Spindler, please
I
escort
did
him
not
out.
get a warning, did I? I
You
don't
had
care about
multiple
your
warnings.
gavel.
Mr. Spindler, you were
Goodbye.
given 2 warnings.
For the record, Mr. Chair, he had multiple warnings in advance of getting ejected from this meeting and violated them.
And he knows the rules, and you've been warned multiple times. Leave quietly and get out. Okay, next we have Mr. Greenspan.
Thank you. Mike Greenspan, a 3-0 Florida Gator, you 0-3 UCLA Bruins. What can I say? Well, let's give some more money to waste. We haven't wasted enough with HHH, $1,200,000,000, so let's have the mayor waste some more money on number 1. After all, he's never found a dime he doesn't enjoy wasting, this mayor or any other mayor. After all, as a person in the Florida legislature told me about his colleagues, they burn a hole in their pocket. Well, obviously that practice is universal. You don't have to be over in Florida. You could do the same thing in California about burning a hole in the pocket. Now, number 2, there's something unkosher about it. I see Englander's name on it, and always when there's Englander's name, there's something that just stinks about it, after all. But it would be nice with the Santa Monica Mountains and a grant, but then you know and I know it's going to get misused. That's the way government does with our money. They love to misuse it. Hire their buddies, featherbed the positions, do everything but the project. Okay, let's look at number 3, a temporary closure of Victory Boulevard from Gilmore Street to its northwesterly terminus. Why don't we just say permanent? Temporary. The Expo line just had a temporary closure, and they reopened it. And after doing their project work at the station that ended at LA Trade Tech. So when it's temporary, usually there is a projected date in which it will be completed. Speaking of which, number 6 and the 6th Street. You mean they haven't done anything on it from all the time they've closed it until now, except looking at the final design and construction support services of the 6th Street Viaduct? We've had all this time and haven't done anything? I'm not surprised. Bruins suck. Now, let's go to general public comment. I live over there.
Start his time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, I live over there on Lancashire, and it has been dark. We're talking about your Bureau of Street Lighting, the street lights from Bose to Sherman on both sides of the street. Now, I know that when a light is on a wood post, you can get it fixed in a day. I know, I used to call them in. But when it's in the metal street lighting, it takes forever. And it's still very dark from Bose Street at Lancashire to Sherman, both sides of the street. Hey, a great place to have crime, a great place for our gangs to ply their trade. Why not? You don't want a well-lit area, you want a dark area. That's where you do better crimes. So maybe mentioning it from the Public Works Committee, we could actually get those lights done on Lancashire between Bose and Sherman. Thank you. It's great to be a Florida Gator, and when will your Bruins win a game? Probably
Okay.
never.
Thank you. Next, Corey Schmidt.
My name's Corey Schmidt, for the record, eh? I'm here to talk about the First Amendment for just a second. Just want to say that even though you heard some
Schmidt,
bullshit,
the items, First Amendment is not an item before you, but you can talk about the items before you. Go ahead.
I heard some bullshit, and I'm sticking up for you a little bit. I like Bob Blumenfield here, and I like Mr. O'Farrell, and I'm just saying that First Amendment is protected here, even though it might piss you off. So, I want to talk about number one in terms of innovation. I don't want to see this 5G bullshit on the agenda again until we talk about some protections, until we figure out how to do it right. Not against the technology,
Please
but
speak to the item. Unless you want to go to your general public comment on this committee, you need to stick to the items before you.
then let's talk about number two, because I want to say that I am also G2. I want you to know that. Don't fuck with my mountains. Don't fuck them up. Those are my mountains. Because if you do, and you put this 5G shit back on there, we're going to talk about number 4 about widening your roadway. I'll make sure that I widen that shit so much we'll have to replace it, just like the viaduct in number 6. So just be careful there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. We have another multiple comment speaker, Mr. Herman.
I get 3 minutes, sir?
2 minutes on the items, and then you'll have an additional minute for general public comment of items within the purview of the committee.
Wow, regarding motion 2 with Englander, why the fuck are we granting an award to someone who's no longer a councilman? A fucking sellout Jew. Then you go to the item number 3, report of Gilmore Street, northwesterly Timinus, closure of Victory. I spoke about that earlier in council chambers before I got removed or ejected. Then in CD 14, where is the bastard Jose Huizar? He was missing in council chambers to mitigate a declaration for Soto Street, the same fucking street that I grew up in my time and tenure as a resident of Boyle Heights. But I was subjected by the disapproval of the California CEQA Act because I'm a white nigger and they kicked me out of Soto Street. And that's Mission Road. In addition to item 6, another CD 14, where's that fucking Jose Huizar? The sellout, the lobbyist, the money laundering Salesian High School motherfucker regarding the Corporation for Final Design and Construction. I don't support your construction because the First Amendment allows me to opinionate whether or not the final design is adequate for our neighborhood and the culture. One fucking bridge, you spend billions of dollars when the infrastructure of this fucking gay community bastards is fucked up. We should send all the fucking Jews back to Israel and save America. Thank you, Donald Trump. I love you for visiting Los Angeles, Dave.
Mr. Herman, you are not speaking to an agenda item.
Regarding item 6, as I said,
warning,
11-17-89-2, fuck you. Now my general public comment. First fucking black president, whether a man or a woman, no less troubling is the defendant's second statement. Shoot the nig, let the country be fucked for another year.
Mr. Herman.
Because never in history has a black
Mr. Herman,
motherfucker
it needs
done
to be
anything
within
right.
the purview of this committee, not
I'm
general
getting
about
to my
anything.
point.
Your last warning.
A black motherfucker has done anything right to fix the conditions in our streets, fix the infrastructure of our bridges, and yet the motherfucker should be shot because his country's been fucked. Done anything right? Have you seen anything done right? What about Watts versus Supreme Court? Statute 394 U.S. at 70506. If they ever make me build a bridge in Los Angeles and hold a rifle, I will shoot the first fucking man I want to get in my sights. Fuck you, 42 U.S.C. 1983, Jew.
We're done with that. Okay. I apologize to everyone who had to endure a lot of these things. It's time that you will never get back. Okay, so now we can move on to the agenda items. Colleagues, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to take items 2, 3, 5, and 6 on consent. I had said 7 before, but we do have public comment on that item. So just without objection, we'll take items 2, 3, 5, and 6 on consent. Oh, great. So it is ordered, and we will move now to item number 1. Mr. Espinosa, if you read that into the record for us, please.
Item number 1 is a report from the City Administrative Officer relative to the Innovation and Performance Commission Innovation Fund funding for the Volunteer LA Hub project from the Mayor's Office.
Great. Welcome, Ms. Swann from the CAO's office, along with Greg Good and Carsey Bowles from the Mayor's office. I think John Sabo, our librarian, is here as well. So we have a full group. So please, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bianca Swann, Project Coordinator for the Innovation and Performance Commission. The Innovation and Performance Commission recommends funding for $105,000 for the Office of the Mayor Volunteer LA Hub. The Mayor's Office Volunteer Engagement Team proposes to create a centralized volunteer hub that will allow users to easily register for volunteer opportunities throughout the city. The hub will create a streamlined volunteer engagement platform that allows across all city departments, allowing potential volunteers to filter through volunteer opportunities that best meet their needs, skills, and availability. As you mentioned, I have members of the mayor's team, library, and ITA that are going to come and provide more information, and we're all available to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Welcome, Mr. Good.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Bianca, Mr. Chair, council members. It's a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your consideration of this proposal. I'm Greg Good, Chief of Legislative and External Affairs for Mayor Garcetti. In 2018, the Corporation for National and Community Service ranked the LA Metro statistical area 46 out of 51 in terms of volunteer engagement. Now, on the one hand, we know that there's something wrong with these numbers. We know, you know, that there's something wrong with these numbers because we work every day with constituents. We work every day with stakeholders. We know folks are engaged and folks want to get engaged. We know this from the outpouring that we've seen at the annual women's marches over the last several years. We know from the outpouring we saw from folks signing up, 16,000 folks signing up just to have the opportunity to volunteer in the 2028 Olympics. That said, where we know that the ranking also may have traction is in this sort of parallel universe. And that's the universe where in Los Angeles, particularly in relation to our outward-facing departments, volunteer and civic engagement opportunities are too often disparate, diffuse, and simply not as accessible as they should be. We all live with the sprawl. We all live with the congestion that can be so discouraging and not an expediter of folks' impulses to volunteer and engage. So in 2018, the Mayor's Office launched the pilot phase of Volunteer LA, with the idea being to create this central hub to facilitate and expedite people's impulses and desire to volunteer and engage. What we've learned a lot of things over the course of that pilot phase, but chief among those is that, simply put, we need a bigger and better engine. We need a vehicle that will allow us to consolidate the operations, that will allow us to get to efficiencies, eliminate redundancies and the duplicativeness of some of the things that that essentially our volunteers have to go through to actually just participate. And if we do that, we'll be able to create the hub that we've been aspiring to, and we'll be able to tap into people wanting to do this kind of volunteer and civic engagement work. This grant will allow us to do that. And so we're very excited to share this proposal with you. Again, we're very appreciative of your time. And what I'd like to do is introduce Carsey Bowles, the director of our Volunteer LA program.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Bowles.
Thank you, Greg.
You can just pull it down. Yeah, there you go.
I'm not that tall. Thank you, and good afternoon, council members. The $105,000 we seek will go towards building a robust volunteer engagement database for all city, capital C departments with volunteer engagement programs. This system will allow for all city departments and all city volunteer opportunities to exist on a single portal, maintain information in a central location, break down silos that currently exist in the volunteer engagement sphere in the city, will improve staff workflow, will promote greater volunteerism, and will answer the needs that we have today in volunteer management, as well as prepare us for the future, seeing that we have large projects coming up like the LA 2028 Olympics, Greg mentioned, but also for things like disaster response volunteers, where there is currently no system in place to track, train, and manage those individuals. Currently, some of the departments that engage volunteers have outdated systems. Some have no systems at all. Some rely on an Excel spreadsheet as a system. This response to the current needs would provide a resource for all city departments to be in one location. It will make the process for prospective volunteers faster, more efficient, and more transparent by allowing them to have one single login for all opportunities. We're working closely with ITA. I have Anthony Lyons, the system analyst here, as Jean Holmison, able to join us today, who we've been working very closely with in identifying the potential resources out there and what considerations technologically we need to bear in mind. Again, this system will allow the city to function more efficiently. It will provide greater customer service both internally and externally, and it'll be a legacy project that serves today as well as for many years to come. We also have City Librarian John Zabo here, as the City Library has agreed to pay the out-year costs after this initial build-in grant of up to $65,000 in perpetuity. We're now open for questions, should you have any, and I'll ask my colleagues to join me.
Great, thank you all for the presentation. I have a couple questions, and of course I love the idea of encouraging volunteers. I've always thought that the city could be a great convener of that, even more so than we are. But for starters, does the mayor's office or the CAO have an estimated cost of how much we're currently spending across all of these departments for processing volunteers and paperwork? Are we expecting to save money from that cost when we move forward with this?
We don't have a total cost, largely because all of the information is very disparate. We know that, for example, LAPD has been tasked with engaging 5,000 new volunteers over the next few months or a year. We know that some departments have systems in place that cost a few $1,000s. This system will really streamline the process, and unfortunately, because we don't have one central location, we can't give citywide scope answers in terms of how many volunteers are engaged in service, because not everybody even tracks them electronically.
Do any of the departments have an electronic platform that they use?
Yes, some of them do. The Los Angeles Public Library is using a resource called Logistics, as is Rec and Park. That is a system that is inadequate and not sufficient for reporting purposes or in terms of engaging volunteers and making that process more efficient. Los Angeles Zoo is using a similar system, Logistics, and LAPD is currently using internally configured databases as well as no database, a combination of the two. And we have Animal Services who is using Logistics, but they have been interested, as the library has been, in changing that system for quite some time.
How much do they each pay for logistics, or do they have one contract, or are they each paying separately?
Every department's volunteer programs are operated completely independently. So every department that has a system pays for that independently. There's an independent contract and they pay different fees. It's based on the number of volunteers that are in the system, which as you can imagine, when we want to engage more individuals in volunteer service, we would prefer a system that does not penalize us for having more people in the system rather than giving us a straightforward answer in terms of licensing for staff users.
Do we have any numbers, like how much Rec and Parks or libraries is paying?
The library tends to spend about $6,000 or $7,000. Rec and Park, I don't have their information, unfortunately. Their volunteer coordinator recently transitioned to a new role. But based on the number of volunteers that they have, I would expect it to be around that number or higher. Animal services probably slightly lower.
Okay. So 30, 40,000 maybe, and then maybe another
That would be a
10
reasonable
or something
estimate,
that we're
yes.
spending, but this will allow us to scale without additional cost.
This would allow us to scale. Those departments would be able to be relieved of those contracts,
Right.
and the $65,000 of licensing each year would be for all city departments and all city staff.
And I assume council offices can use this as an independent department, and how would that work? So if I, as a council office, had a big earthquake, we had a lot of people, we had hundreds of people volunteering, we used spreadsheets. Would we be able to plug that into this on the day of, or would those people have had to have signed up earlier?
So the volunteers that you're speaking of are convergent volunteers in disasters. There would still be quite a few of those individuals who on the day of or days following a disaster would want to answer that call to be of service. They wouldn't be in a system already, but having this system in place would allow us to take information ahead of time so that we would be able to track who has already filled out a waiver, who has signed a consent form, what kind of skills there are in terms of our volunteer users. So it would be a combination, and we would be able to be proactive in getting their information and being able to send out calls to action. So if we have a list of volunteers who have said, I'm trained in first aid, in the days following an earthquake, we could send out a list to just those individuals of how they can get engaged in their community. And this platform would also have a disaster response component where if there were something where the city had to turn on its disaster response notifications on the website, whether it be a fire or an earthquake, we would have a way of, within this system, putting up a banner or changing the website to a disaster response so that people know, one, we don't want them to just show up somewhere. We want them to go to a nonprofit agency or city department that has a use for them at that time. Two, we would help indicate to them that, unfortunately, donations are limited in terms of what we can accept. And three, how they can stay engaged and up to date in the days and weeks following a disaster, as we know that much of the volunteer response to a disaster can be done over the course of a year. It's not just the immediate days.
Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank the Innovation and Performance Commission for your great work, thinking outside the proverbial box. And this proposal, I say this every chance I get, and that is the City of Los Angeles would be nowhere without our volunteer corps. Our offices wouldn't be successful without volunteers. It's the volunteer corps that make this city work, in my view, especially as someone who started out as a volunteer way back in the day. A few questions. There are other existing nonprofits that serve as hubs for a variety of volunteer options like LA Works and Volunteer Match. They've been around a long time. How do you imagine this system, Volunteer LA, working with those systems so there's not, needless repetition and, yeah.
Right. So the primary solution that this offers is for the city departments. We have tens of thousands. Again, unfortunately, we don't have a complete number because of the lack of a system in place to get that. But we have tens of thousands of volunteers who, if we can put them all in one system, one location, they'll see more opportunities. I work closely with LA Works. They're part of our nonprofit council. And I spoke with Debbie and Natana last week at the 9/11 event. And they know where we're going with this platform, the concept behind it, and they're all for it because they do see that need as a city that we have a responsibility to serve our constituents, our staff, our volunteers to the best of our ability. So we wouldn't be duplicating any of their efforts. They would still be a nonprofit partner of ours, and we would work together closely.
And so might we refer some to them as well based on the data that we collect from them?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
And then you mentioned additional funding from the library after this initial investment.
Yes.
Can you talk a little more about that?
So we wanted to make sure that this grant wouldn't be a one-year source of funding, and then we wouldn't have an answer for the following years. John Zabo is here from the library. They have agreed to pay the licensing fee for this hub after the initial build and the initial year of licensing. So we do have funding in place for all of those out years. The licensing cost is for city staff to be able to use it, and that would mean that we can have more staff on the ground in the field using this system to track their volunteer hours, to recruit more volunteers and be more responsive.
And so you're also presenting an impact that the various departments get calls from people unsolicited saying, how can I help, how can I volunteer?
Yes.
And is that sort of where this was born from?
So this was born from seeing where we are as a city in terms of how we're serving our volunteer programs. I was a volunteer coordinator with the library department and working with colleagues and also with our nonprofit partners to really identify where we can make the biggest impact in the volunteer space in Los Angeles. And this came out of not having that information in one central location, even for city staff members. So when I first came on board with the city and tried to find a lot of this information, it's all very siloed. And by putting it together, we're able to not only emphasize the impact that a volunteer for the library or Rec and Park or LAPD has for that department, but also build that belief they have in themselves as an active agent of the city, so that they are not only a animal services volunteer, but they're a City of Los Angeles volunteer, and they're able to go out into the community and provide that greater support, and not only provide support on the ground, but also verbally as advocates.
And then lastly, I've volunteered for a number of organizations over the years, and I place a high value on the volunteer orientation. Would the city be doing regular orientations for volunteers, or would a third party hired by the city do that? Because I just think that's so important. So not everything's done online. There's the human interaction element.
That's a great point. Part of this system would allow for a standardized level of information provided to volunteers on that initial touch point by making there be some guidelines, expectations, allowing them to understand the ability they have in terms of workplace safety and violence prevention, so that they know across the board what those resources are as a city volunteer. Right now, everything is siloed. We would be able to have centralized documentation for all volunteers, so that there would be a base layer of information. And then from there, based on the volunteer opportunity that they are interested in serving in, there would be additional information. So if they're serving with the library reading to children, they would go through that orientation process. This hub would not usurp each department's authority or their volunteer engagement programs. It would simply give them a tool to do their jobs more effectively and to provide more efficient trainings and to get people engaged faster. So there would be that orientation process, and each would be determined based on their specific opportunities.
I would suggest that it would be worthwhile to have some sort of knowledge or even an evaluation of exactly what an orientation looks like per department, so that there is in fact one. The worst thing in the world we could do is get someone who's all altruistic and ready to volunteer and do something good, and then they get short shrift. They show up and maybe there's not much there, but they're there to help. So that would be, I think, a fine tuning to do in advance so that we're really prepared.
Yes, I very much agree. With this, we would be bringing together all of the staff members from city departments who serve as volunteer coordinators, or whether or not that's their actual title, to bring them together and to talk about all of these issues. And one of the things that this database and platform would allow is the front-facing component, so that we, instead of having to turn volunteers away from something if it's at capacity, because there is a capacity oftentimes, they would be able to see those live opportunities. So they would have less of a tendency to be turned away, because they would already know going into it. Unfortunately, maybe the Echo Park Library doesn't have any more need for star readers on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., but because they're in this ecosystem, they can readily see other opportunities that they might not have thought about. Because with our city departments and prospective volunteers, oftentimes if you don't know that a specific opportunity exists or how to find it, you won't ever know.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I just really strongly suggest putting on a customer service hat when dealing with volunteers. And that's not always the case when someone calls the city of LA for assistance, and we get that. But it's really important. Just that personal touch is so important, especially when people are calling because they want to help.
Exactly.
Yeah, anyway, okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just really wanted to commend this effort, the mayor's office, the Innovative Fund, the library for stepping up, as always. Councilman O'Farrell asked a lot of the questions I had. I wanted to make sure that we don't duplicate the efforts of like what LA Works does, which, but I see this as more of an internal system. Will you be coming back and giving us a report in 3 months once so there's no actual set thing developed yet, right?
Correct. We're waiting for funding to take those next big steps. Once we have funding and then we are able to enter into contracts, we expect, based on the estimates given, that it would take about 3 months for a build. And if you'd like an update once we do have a build final, I'd be happy to join you again. And I'd also be happy to communicate with your offices once we do have everything set up so that whoever is responsible for your volunteers can be trained in this database as well.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, whether it's after the contract is awarded or after its program is written or after it's been in effect for several months, I don't care when. I would love for it to come back to committee so we can get an update because we discussed it in my office as well, but even though our council districts are big and we represent a lot of people, it's still not big enough to do something like an endeavor like this within our office. And I just can't tell you how many people, homeowners, associations, actual neighbors who have come up to me and say, you know, I am a world-renowned dance instructor, ballerina, and I would love to give some free courses. I'm a pianist, and I would love to volunteer my services. And I just send them to LA Works, but it would be great if we could not only list the current existing volunteer opportunities, but maybe do a matchmaking service where we list people who have skill sets that they could volunteer for so agencies could look them up as well.
Yes, we do plan on having an ability for people to give us their information and the option, because we do want to provide a simplified process as a person would like, an option to give us as many of their skills or interest areas as they'd like so that if something does come up and someone needs a dance teacher, we can pull up that information very quickly and send out an alert and say, hey, you expressed an interest in teaching a dance class. Are you available? So that we can connect people.
Great. Thank you.
And will nonprofit organizations be able to register on our directory?
So our plan is to have a space on the website to link to nonprofit partners. What we've learned through the pilot phase, which has nonprofit opportunities listed directly on the site, is that nonprofits, as many of you, all of you know, they have tried and true systems for engaging volunteers. And what we don't want to do is add another step to the volunteers who want to volunteer for that agency or to the agency's workload in terms of putting their information on the site. So our goal is to have an area with a nonprofit directory, kind of like a Yelp resource, so that nonprofits just have their information input once, and then if a volunteer, prospective volunteer, is interested in that agency, say it's 826LA or Chrysalis, they can link directly to that agency's portal for signing in to volunteer, so that we're making the connection and playing matchmaker, but we're not trying to impose a process or system onto the nonprofits who already have something in place.
And are we going to vet the ones that we put onto that site, or
Yes.
what's the screen that we use?
So we have an initial group of nonprofit partners. They've already been vetted by the mayor's office, and then moving forward, we would vet official partners as well to ensure that the volunteer experience is something that we can stand behind, to make sure that their agency is serving the community in a responsible and respectful way, and to make sure that they will have the response that we would hope all of the people that go through us get.
Great. Unless there's an objection, colleagues, I'd like to us to approve the recommendations in the CAA report and move forward on this item. Seeing no objection, that'll be the order.
Thank you, council members.
Congratulations on that. So next we have, I think we did 2 and 3 on consent, so item number 4.
Item number 4 is report from the Board of Public Works relative to the Soto Street Roadway Widening Project, approval and the CEQA compliance for the project located on Soto Street from Multnomah Street to Mission Road.
Okay, we'll start. We have a public comment card on the item from Nikos Katselis. I apologize if I mispronounced.
So I wanted to start and voice my disgust on the earlier insulting, racist, bigoted comments by some of the audience. They don't represent who we are as a city. With that, I wanted to get back to the Soto Street widening project. I represent a few private property owners along the street expansion, and we've been following the project for the last 8 years or so. We're proponents of the project, but there's some concerns regarding the accessibility of our property to the street. So originally the city had allocated 70 feet of Soto Highway allocation and 20 feet parallel to that for accessibility. Right now this project takes all 90 feet for the project. What that would mean is that there will be some major excavation of the rock, and it will...
Go ahead, no problem.
And it will sort of forbid us from developing our properties, which are right now zoned to be residential. So even though the NEPA, the environmental document, says that there is no community adverse effect, it in effect forbids the development of these properties as residential. What we would like to see, and we saw a lot of good faith on the Department of Public Works to work with us to provide a solution, is to put at least a language on the project as it moves forward, because we know that although the Department of Public Works has the intent of working with us, the funds are coming from the city.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And then we have Adam Acosta from CD 14, Councilmember Puizars, and we'll have staff, and if both of you can help address the comments that were made publicly as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Acosta, and committee members. We stand in support of the Soto Street project. It's been long overdue. I know there's been a lot of community input over the last few months, last couple of years. We believe those comments and concerns have been taken up with Public Works and its staff. This will provide additional lanes as well as protected bike paths, widening of the sidewalks. All these recommendations have been taken up by the department as well as the staff and the residents coming together to provide these recommendations. So we look forward to working with the department so this project can come to fruition real soon. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Acosta. Now we'll have Shirley Lau from the Bureau of Engineering, and if you could, as part of your comments, address the public comments that were made as well.
Yes, Councilmember. Good afternoon, Shirley Lau with the Bureau of Engineering Bridge Improvement Division. I'll just start with briefly providing the background of this project. It's located in the northeastern part of LA along Soto Street between Multnomah Street and Mission Road, and it serves as a corridor connecting cities to the communities of Lincoln Heights, Boyle Heights, and El Sereno. So we had recent traffic analysis done. It shows the capacity in the southbound direction of Soto Street. It's very inadequate along the whole segment. And also, as it approaches Multnomah Street, the roadway narrows and there's a design deficiency. So it causes a bottleneck. It restricts southbound traffic into just a single lane. So as you go along on the northbound direction, you have, on Soto Street, you have a huge hillside, and that's where the property owners' properties are on the top of the hillside. And so there's sediment and debris that erodes when it rains, and it comes down onto the roadway during storm events, and it poses a potential hazard for vehicles. So in order to relieve traffic congestion, improve efficiency of the traffic circulation, increase safety, and also add multimodal elements, this project will be adding an additional travel lane. We'll have new sidewalks, protected bike lanes on both sides, and we will be installing some shoulders and then a retaining wall along the hillside area due to the debris coming down. And we'll also add green elements such as landscaping and trees. Additional right-of-way and permanent easements would be required to accommodate the widening and also the retaining wall that's going to be to help keep the hillside debris off the roadway. The Bureau has held 3 community meetings, and we've met with the community members, and in general, everyone's supportive of the project along with the council office. On the public comments earlier, the Bureau is in the process of evaluating how much of this retaining wall we actually need in order to maintain the safety of vehicles and then also be able to provide the access that these property owners would like. And so we've been working on analyzing it. However, we do need to continue with the adoption of this mitigated negative declaration so we can move into final design. So as we do the final design, we'll know how much wall we need and how much property we'll need, and so that will be discussed later on with these property owners. We definitely will continue to work with them and the community and the council office, and so the Bureau requests this committee to consider and approve the recommendations in this report. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right. Actually, in your presentation answered the questions that I had. So, colleagues, Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lau, so you heard the property owner speak previously. With this, approving this MND, would this allow you to continue having the conversation about access to his property?
Yes, absolutely. I think their concern, and they could correct me if I'm wrong, but their concern is the entire, originally in our proposal, we wanted the entire hillside area to be a retaining wall. However, as we engineer it, we may not need that to be done, and so therefore access would be available for them should they want to develop their properties in the future.
Okay, I see. So the dialogue is still open, and of course, working with the council office as well.
Yes, absolutely. We'll continue to work with the community and the council office on this issue.
Sounds like a great project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? No? Then I'm going to recommend that we adopt the recommendations contained in the Board of Public Works report to adopt the mitigated negative declaration and project as defined in the final initial study. Thank you very much. Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
And Mr. Esposito, I think we have one more item, item number 7.
Item number 7 is a motion from Council Members Rodriguez and Krikorian relative to designing the intersection at Commerce Avenue, designating the intersection at Commerce Avenue and Walmart Street as William Saroyan Square.
Great, thank you. We have 2 public comment cards here. This Lydia Grant, followed by Carol Hutchinson. Grant, welcome.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak today. As many of you know, or most of you know, I'm Lydia Grant. I am the Vice President of the Sunland Tonga Neighborhood Council. I am here today on my own behalf as a stakeholder in my community, a community that I was born in. We have a very historic community, and what we're asking you today to do is to please postpone this item until it can go before the neighborhood council so that the community can give input on it. It is already causing a lot of dissension within our community because the person that's being recognized with this recognition is somebody who's never been to our community, has never contributed to our community, and we're asking that the community be allowed to give some input on this. So we would ask for this to go to the neighborhood council so that there can be some community input. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Carol Hutchinson, and I also am on the Neighborhood Council, but I'm here today speaking as a stakeholder for the community. I've lived there 17 years, and I was quite frankly surprised when I learned last night that this intersection name was proposed for our community with absolutely no community input. We don't have a lot in our little town. We've just got 1 or 2 little historical areas. And to take and name this historical little area, or this intersection, after someone who has absolutely no connection to our community is kind of strange. I mean, if we're going to name this little area something, it should be somebody who has had a direct impact, has had some connection, who has done something for our community rather than just this out-of-the-blue name change. If the councilwoman still would like to give an intersection a name, it can be another intersection, but it shouldn't be in our little historical area. And I also want to just real quick, our councilwoman's representative was at our neighborhood council meeting the day that this was signed and made absolutely no mention of it to our neighborhood council. So the community really only found out about this last night. So we're really asking that you postpone it until we can have some input into it. Thank you.
There are no other speakers on this. What I'm going to suggest we do, but I'll open it up to my colleagues, is that we approve the motion, but we don't send it right away to council, so that gives you some time to work with your councilwoman to figure this out. But she had asked us to get it through committee, so I'd like to do that. But we will not submit it. It will not be on the agenda this week in council. You'll get some grace time to work with your councilwoman on that. So that's my recommendation. Are there any other comments or from committee members? So without objection, then we will approve the motion, and we will.
Yeah, I just asked to let you know that our neighborhood council meetings are the second Wednesday of the month.
Okay, thank you. Great. Without objection, that will be the order. Thank you very much. And Mr. Espinosa, is there anything else on our agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.